Kaya Herstad-Carney, it's lovely to be with you again today. Can I just ask, vocal technique, what is that to you?
So technique obviously could be bad technique or good technique. So I would say good vocal technique is the ability to create the notes that you hear in your heart and in your head and is demanding of you for the material that you're trying to do with the ease and efficiency that requires.
Then when it comes to style, what is that defined as for you?
So style would be the artistic lens of which we might deliver the song, depending on the genre. It can be pop tricks, it can be understanding of the timbre that is appropriate for a certain style, and the delivery from an artistic point of view.
And if technique and style were to walk down the aisle and bid their vows to each other, what sort of marriage do you think that they would have ongoing? What's their interplay?
Can we say bid their vows to each other? Sorry, that's very
Oh my
nerdy.
gosh, yeah. I missed a trick there, didn't I?
Well, I can certainly say that some singers have a more toxic relationship. There are many where our role as singing teachers would be to help balance out so they can afford some infidelities. And we're going to continue that metaphor. Whilst, if you do have a good relationship between style and technique, then it's got to do with finding ways to create that doesn't compromise on the sound we want and the health.
What are some obstacles that you find singers tend to be up against more often than others when they are working on technique but also have a style to maintain?
Well, some things can actually be unhelpful. Like if you do want to do a lot of flipping, for example, but you also want to have a strong mix, then that, is an opposite functionality. So that could be really challenging. It's absolutely possible, but just as with crossover singing, you need more skills and more coordinations and the knowledge and the skill set to move around things.
When we're talking technique, whether that's a foundational technique, a functional technique, do you think it's important for all singers, regardless of style, to be able to find adducted, abducted chest, adducted, abducted falsetto, be able to mix, be able to belt, be able to transition? Or do some singers just not need some of that?
Well, need is relative, isn't it?
Right.
You're likely to have more stamina and longevity if you are able to do a variety of pitches and a variety of coordination, especially in regards to kind of finding the middle ground and balance and a smooth transition. It's likely for your voice to be in a better state health-wise. There are some singers who don't sing super challenging stuff. Do they actually need to be able to, find the higher part of their voice?
I remember speaking with Mark DeLissa last year on the topic of how to sing and teach gospel. And he was very clear in the fact that technique is second to the emotional release of the style. So as singing teachers and voice coaches, how can we identify when something is a technical issue that we might want to put the focus on for a while compared to a stylistic choice?
I talk a lot about my magical triangle, which is essentially in one corner is the preparedness of the song, the knowledge, the lyric, the melody, the rhythm, the genre, and that kind of knowledge and of the song. And then this other corner, you've got the singing technique, vocal and physical health, have you slept? All these kind of physical and coordination issues. And then finally, the last corner is authenticity, storytelling, acting journey, if it's that kind of material, and the conviction to the material. And if you don't have all three, some of the magic falls out. And that's something that I talk about. Actually, I will show you it as well. So this is where I would have the knowledge of everything, synesthetic understanding, and then biology coordination, preparedness, posture health. Are you wearing a corset? All kind of outer things than body things, and then passion, intention, internal conviction. And I think sometimes you are staying here because it's, especially if you're working on a material that you're learning from a score, you have to learn it properly. If it's your own material, it's slightly different, but it could be, the stylistic understanding. You're trying to do a neo-soul piece, but you're sounding like you're singing musical theatre, vice versa. And then sometimes working up here in the emotive world could actually help you with some of the singing technique. So, in one lesson, we might not visit all three corners, but when we get to performance, that's kind of where we want to be, where all of this is present.
Thinking of that then, the magic triangle as you just described there, how can we best communicate to the singer when a stylistic choice is pushing out some of the magic from the technical foundation without insulting them, but also helping them to become aware of it?
I think sometimes just actually pointing out, they might not be aware that they are using it, or they might be very aware, and you can say, well, do you have to use this on every phrase? Could we actually try? I sometimes describe it as glitter. If you put glitter on everything, then it's only going to appeal to people who really like glitter. The little bit in the corner of your eye is probably not going to offend anyone. It is that kind of, if you do the really, like a fry onset, for instance, and really great people who don't like a fry onset, a little bit here and there can be really, stylish.
Equally then, as teachers, how can we help a singer to work on that technical corner of that magic triangle without sacrificing the style that makes them and their identity as a singer?
So I would say it would be rebalancing the voice during a warm-up, during, a kind of exercise routine where they get functionality and they're working. And we're kind of thinking of it like TAs, not ballet dancing, right? It's the bit that you don't necessarily do while you do the performance, but it will make your body more prepared and have more stamina to be able to cope with those things.
Considering styles like classical or heavy metal, what do you think of the opinion that singing shouldn't be wildly different from the way we speak?
Yeah, it's the speech quality kind of argument. I think, for instance, in musical theatre, I think that can give you a real authenticity to start in your speaking voice. If it's not, golden age where you might be expecting a certain sound if you're, the romantic leads. Whilst if you're storytelling, you sing a songwriter, it does give an authenticity to the performance, the fact that it sounds a bit like you're speaking to me. Do you have to? No, of course not. Does Cher sound like that when she speaks? No, she doesn't. Yeah, examples can be many. Then equally, if you had Cher in your studio and you try to make her sound more balanced, you'd mess up her career.
So I've been thinking about your delicious style menu that you have on your website. It's very lovely and very helpful, actually, as a singing teacher to kind of reference. Can you give us some idea of what we could add to a song to make it sound more stylistically exciting?
What I do with the style menu is essentially the left-hand side is generally functional. It's got to do with, vocal fold compression, larynx position, and various things like airflow. But you could use those things as stylistic tools as well. A more breathy onset versus a glottal onset can definitely affect the style. And then you have things like scoops and trills and melismas and various things, a little bit of distortion or growl. Yeah, you could use it like a menu where you pick a bit here and pick a bit there. Vowel placement, somebody got a massive impact on timbre and tone.
And I'm guessing some of those stylistic pepperings, if you like, aren't going to be as easy if some singers don't have certain technical bits in place. So a fry onset, we need to be able to find fry. And if we've got a high tension in the vocal folds, if we do a lot of high, loud singing, that might be quite difficult to fine. So I guess they're not wildly apart. They don't have to be two separate things, but actually, as you said, you can use the compression levels as both functionality and style.
Yeah, exactly. And, some of the, like say vibrato, if you listen to indie music, especially like male vocals, indie music, there's hardly ever any vibrato on. And then, in jazz, you might find it either throughout or, towards the end of the phrases. And like every genre has some things that are almost expected. And then somebody comes along and does something that is defying. Somebody comes along and do something that is genre defying. And we're all like, oh, that's exciting. Why is that exciting? And it becomes, pop now is so versatile.
I've got a couple of case studies here, and this isn't to be judgmental of the singer, but it's just to have something to analyze and reference. So imagine that you open your studio door and you welcome in George Ezra. Now, George Ezra has quite a distinctive voice. Like Cher, he tends to sing what is perceptually a low larynx position. Speaking technically, what is a lower larynx position offering George Ezra?
Well, the biggest bass boosts low frequencies. So you naturally will get a lower boost. The timbre, your voice sounds lower. I can't do a George Ezra impression.
I thought you did quite well.
Yeah. Too much vibrato for him. But yeah, they will offer that, but then he doesn't do the kind of lifted, soft palate and rounded vowels that would make it more of a classical sound. That's why it's kind of coming across still as a poppy sound.
And he actually mentioned in an interview with GQ magazine in 2019, and this is just a quote from him, saying that there was a blonde-haired singer-songwriter on every street corner. I asked myself, what are you going to do that's different? So I used to tune my guitar down so that it was lower, and I tried to sing with the biggest voice that I could, which makes sense if the lower larynx is going to create a bigger space and boost those lower frequencies, then he's achieved it.
I was going to say, yeah, he probably didn't know he was doing form and tuning but he was.
And so in that sense then, say George Ezra wanted to, he does flip up in songs like Budapest, but if he wanted to take some of his songs higher, would that have to change?
It might get into some trouble if he wants to maintain that low, but, there's other way of elongating or increasing the space in a vocal track, like for instance through, rounded vowels in the mouth or opening up in a different way. So I kind of like the whole idea of undervowel, overvowel, and Ken Bozeman and Mean Howell's work on these kind of where, yeah, you can create excitement or dullness depending on, and again, this is not a judgmental way, but do you want it to be more edgy? Do you want it to be more muted? It's artistic, isn't it? It's just more colors to paint with. You can see a singer like Billie Eilish who's properly changed through the years. And I don't know if you've seen her brother talk about the production.
I haven't, no.
But they add a whisper track on many of the songs. And then you have your singers come into the studio trying to sing very breathy, but actually Billie Eilish isn't singing super breathy. She's whispering on top of it to add that kind of breath sound.
Right.
And when you hear it live in festivals, there's actually a fair bit of compression there.
Okay, so what does that then mean for our singers who are hearing this effect on the radio and wanted to emulate it, and they're perceiving it as breathy, but we don't always get that research element when we're enjoying a car concert and we're just being aspirate the whole time.
Totally. And I think the most important thing for all of us to remind our singers is, for instance, Kelly Clarkson, the 6 Kelly Clarkson on Because of You, it's doubled, right? It's multi-tracked. And we're hearing this really big, solid, fat voice, that got her into trouble when she was touring it. And she's quite open about that. And it is because you cannot do what you do in the studio live, because you have the access to all of these effects. Actually, you can more and more now, because you can have your own vocal effect units and put some of these things like even distortion, but that what you hear on a release is not the natural, there's loads of talk about this on TikTok and Instagram of singers like faking it. It's like, no, they're not faking it. They are doing post-production.
I do tend to encourage singers to listen to the live versions to get a truer sense of what is being asked of the singer in those environments, but also a truer sense of the actual song. Because, we do forget that we are listening to a different type of art when we are hearing it on Spotify or whatever.
Totally. And even the live one, on the big productions, you might still have these effect units, and you might have live compression where they're quieter, so they can sing super quiet because the compression, for those who are not familiar with production techniques, compression basically lifts the quiet and take down the loud. So with somebody like Billie Eilish singing something with really low vocal fold compression in certain areas, because she isn't whispering, but she is singing, sometimes with really low compression or weak compression, the compressor would then lift her lowest volume up so that can still be heard on the festival stage.
So in that sense as well then, with what Billie is doing, we could maybe not have to sacrifice the technical side of things, because we have technological tools to enhance the thing that we're trying to be identified as or to show up as in the music industry.
Right. Yeah. And if that is something that's super important for you, then actually getting into production skills and understanding how you can create some of those sounds in a way that isn't compromising on your vocal health could be really useful.
What other advice would you give to singers who are wanting to sound different? And as we mentioned with Vocalize You, Big Billy Clark and Elliot O'Connor recently, how do you help them become that flamingo in a flock of pigeons without contorting their voice in a way that physiologically doesn't marry, but which also helps them to be aesthetically different?
Well, one of the things is that there is no other you, right? And if you just look at your face versus the person that you might be covering's face, there's going to be different cavities because of the way we are differently shaped, If we are doing the same thing, even just listen to our fundamental frequency when we're talking, as in like the pitch that we are carrying during our conversation, you could imagine that my voice is slightly lower than your voice, although we both have quite bright voices. That's even before we've started to think about accents and, me being a Scandinavian and all these kind of languages and the way we shape and who we listen to, It's part of the sympathetic nervous system as well, though, how if you've hung around with a friend for a long time, you start picking up mannerisms and things that they say. We do that with artists we listen to, even if we are professional and don't try and sound like them. We are going to, monkey see, monkey do. Imitation is just so innate in our person.
To be honest, Kaya, I only have to turn my face one way and I look like a completely different person. I have such an non-symmetrical face. Every picture that you see of me is always of my left side and never of the right, because they look completely different.
but it's a good, there's things that I can do, that I can adjust certain things to make me sound different. And that would be, nurture, depending on how I speak, and I can sound really different.
For those of you listening, like without looking at me, you might go, okay, is this still person?
Has she actually been, possessed? I haven't. I'm just using various
concepts within my vocal tract to speak differently.
Right? So that is experimentation, learning about isolating the various movable parts in the vocal tract. So your larynx, your pharynx, your soft palate, your jaw, your lips, your tongue, all of those things will have massive output on the timbre that we do. And we haven't even started about musicianship and phrasing, and are you going to come in slightly before the beat or slightly after, riffs and runs and changing the melody around and changing the key, time signature. There's so much musicianship, artistry as well, and so many tools. And, this is why I love working with singing teaching as artist development, because helping somebody find their voice, not just physically, but also metaphorically, of like, are you saying what you want to say? Are you saying it in the way you want to say it? Are you connecting with the people that you want to connect with? And that's why I always try and instill in, like, my water-based students, we're like, well, you are you. You can never be another Billie Eilish or Ezra or whatever. I insert whichever artist here, but you can be the best version of you that you can be.
We are so grateful that you tune in each week to geek out with us. It's our mission here at the Singing Teachers Talk podcast to bring you informed discussions across a variety of topics in the hope that they will inspire your teaching and support your career in voice. Now, I have a big favour to ask of you. Pretty please, can we steal a little bit of your time in asking for a review? This not only helps us to improve the platform, but will help spread the word to others who might be in search of a community like the one you've helped us to build here. You can leave your review over at Apple Podcasts by leaving a comment beneath your favourite video on our YouTube channel, or by emailing me your testimonial directly at alexa@basstraining.com. If you've been enjoying the podcast, we'd love to hear about it. And thank you again for all your support, Bass Brigade. Bastions? The Talkers. I'll work on the name.
What happens then for you when an artist is creating their work, goes into the studio, and then is performing in different venues? How does style and technique get influenced by the environment that we're in and the audience that we're performing to?
Oh, I think definitely everything influences everything, right? It's a very big question. I think being able to adjust to an environment, whether that is, it's a more intimate environment, so you might need to do a more intimate performance and connect in a different way. But then some artists will do a super aloof, just be in their own world and, kind of fourth wall entirely up, all the time. And that is right for those artists. Big stages, again, we can talk about things like, do you need in-ears so that you can have control about what you hear, understanding what to ask for in the monitor? There is a different skill set than what you would get if you are doing recitals in a hall with great acoustic.
And I guess the role of technique there is to have something reliably in the body so that you can be at will to add stylistic qualities, whether they're choreographed or whether they just come in the emotive moment, rather than having to worry about, oh crap, that bit's coming up and I need to support here, be in this register, use this vowel.
Automation of technique, getting your muscle memory, the myelination of those, like every time, because we can't really, we can't bulk up our vocal muscles, but what we can do is increase the coordination and like the neural synapses firing off quicker and more accurately the more you do it correctly. And that's, then you can rely on your technique then. And, if you are feeling a bit puffy or a bit tired and like you ate fried chicken and had a glass of wine and you're feeling reflexy and, your technique is still there to be relied upon. And, if we are talking in the pop rock world, there's so much there mentioning reflex that, there's going to bed late, often eating after gigs, often free alcohol, let's face it, maybe early interviews in the morning the next day, so you might be sleeping in the tour bus with loads of snoring men. No judgment. There's loads of things that can be real challenging, and eating on the go, riders, all that kind of stuff, and having awareness of all the demands of your voice, not just in a singing technique way, but in a holistic way, becomes much more integral for those touring musicians. Musical theatre too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, touring there, finding your digs, and not maybe having the budget to be in something that is, Not that a tour bus is posh, but you know, one thing that I think would be really bothersome for me if I was a touring artist is the snoring with other people around. I can't deal with snoring. It's one of the noises that I just can't cope with. But I'm not very direct with it. My husband doesn't snore, but if he's making a noise that is just grating when we're asleep, I will bounce the mattress. And then he'll go, "Oh, are you okay?" I'll be like, "Oh, yes, just turning over." When really I was bouncing to try and wake him up.
Yeah, you know, we've all done a little elbow in the side and stuff. I mean, my savior there is I've got a headband, headphones with noise cancelling.
Oh,
It's
nice.
a Christmas present wish.
Okay, yeah. Maybe that's what I'll need to get, so I don't have to bounce the mattress and be passive aggressive.
But I mean, you're right, and especially early career, this is where many people give up, because it's also where you get next to no money, and you have to give up your day job because you're busy touring, and you get minimal per diem budget to go and, you know, yeah, it's taken us a bit of a diversion. But I do think, you know, for any of you working with people who are on that kind of cusp of becoming professional or early professional stages, where they might still be working, you know, through the week in the day job and then spending the weekend sleeping in a van or at sofa hopping, and you know, what's that going to do to your neck if you are constantly sleeping in different, you know, it's so much that we sometimes might forget to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've mentioned Billie Eilish already, but imagine there is an artist who really identifies with that more aspirate sound. How would you go about helping them to maintain a healthy, rounded, balanced voice? Because as we can imagine, and we know that being breathy a lot can be quite drying vocally. So what would your approach be there in the studio with a Billie Eilish type singer?
So I would go back to the kind of, this is a plie, this is dancing. We are conditioning your vocal instruments so that you are able, or another analogy, this is the songwriter, always speaking analogy, is the more you exercise, the more you can get away with eating ice cream. You know, as part of a balanced diet. Because, you know, it is a balance, and a voice has it's almost like a currency. How much have you spent? How much do you have left? And by doing those balancing exercises regularly, your SLVTs and your, you know, whichever one's appropriate to that particular singer. I've unfortunately never worked with Billie Eilish, but say that she might benefit for something that is gentle compression exercises and working in the kind of balanced mix after she's had a studio session where she's been super breathy, or after she's been doing a gig to warm down, you know, potentially have some scheduling in some conditioning days where this is where you were, you know, in rehearsal. Do you need to do it full on style here, or can you do some kind of marking? Although the problem with the marking, do you know what I mean by that, like the kind of doing it not quite. The problem with that is that's what you're automating. So if you do it too much, then that takes away from your myelination and like getting those neural circuits firing off how you want them to live, and it might make you less likely to be able to rely on your technique. So I would actually rather recommend, you know, stepping down the amount of hours that you rehearse, but do it accurately.
And would you then, as with part of that conditioning work, is that finding adduction, finding a stronger compression, so that breathiness just doesn't become the only thing that you can do?
Yeah, or, you know, is that the breathiness, is that exactly what you need for what you're trying to achieve artistically? And sometimes that can be finding an artistic choice that is medium vocal compression, but it still has that softness to it, but it's balanced rather than completely airy.
If somebody was struggling with that, that's what they were aiming for, to not have just breath, but have a bit more closure, but quietly. What do they need to work on technically to get that?
Well, that's a very good question, isn't it? So yeah, you would work on finding a middle ground. Now, messa de voce and things like that could be very useful. Any dynamic exercises. If those of you not familiar with messa de voce, would be to go from quietest to loud, and then so crescendo, decrescendo, if you want, because you do need to have a certain balance between the muscles and the air, as I might say to a student who aren't a vocal nerd yet. And that can be a great exercise, because you are then showing dynamic variety, and that is one of our good signs for vocal function.
And I guess with Billie, she doesn't present herself as like somebody who wants to belt all of the time. She shows us a bit here and there. I must admit, I don't listen to Billie Eilish's music a lot, but from what I hear, she's shown us that it's a possibility in songs like No Time to Die. But I guess with her softer approach at things, that's not going to assist a belt. Like a breathy tone is going to swallow some of that resonance, I can imagine.
Yeah, a more compressed vocal fold up to a certain degree will create more resonance in the upper harmonics, more access to resonance in the upper harmonics. So, that makes total sense. But I did see an interview with her, and so I'm not a specialist on Billie Eilish, but I did see an interview with her who said, when she released her first album, she was like 15 or 16 when it recorded, and she did have that glottal chink that many teenage girls had. And she said, like, by the time I was recording my second album, and she was like 18, 19, she had access to a lower range, she had access to volume, she had access to a whole different voice. I'm paraphrasing, but something along those lines. And I just thought, yeah, I hear so many vocal codes like blaming Billie Eilish for all the airy singers, and it's like, yeah, but we're talking about a kid who released an album, and then you have the whole kind of whispery or oral excitement they add on top, adding those higher frequencies. Then yeah, I think we have loads more to see from her voice, because some of the stuff that she can do, and there must be some balance there, because there's riffs, right? There's fast movement, agility between the upper and the lower range. You can't do that if you are totally airy falsetto, or whatever you want to call that quality.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it, how because we aren't judging these voices here, but as armchair critics, sometimes we can sit back and say, oh, they're a bit airy, or whatever comes out when we're on the radio, listening to the radio. But just because that's how they're presenting in that song doesn't actually mean that that's the limitation of their technique or ability. It's just what they have chosen to share for a particular reason at that moment.
Yep, absolutely. And, imagine if any of us... Imagine somebody listening back to this, or any other professional practice that you've done this week, and just like tell you everything that they would have done differently all the time. There's sometimes we didn't sit down and go, then you're going to say this, then you're going to say that, but it's going to be there forever because of recording, and that happens when you're in the studio as well. You put something down that was how you felt and how you chose to tackle that specific task in that moment. And then it becomes part of your forever professional practice.
And aren't we always, yeah, I know, right? I don't want to do this anymore. We're always encouraging our singers to embrace your voice as it is, your individuality. And really, maybe that's what Billie was doing at that age. As you say, we can expect breathiness to be a symptom of the female voice change. So yeah, why don't we embrace the fact that there's going to be an aspirate quality? If we're singing in a style that it's appropriate in, great, let's embrace it instead of trying to close it. I mean, okay, yes, there is the argument to get a more clean sound, but if that's what your voice is presenting as, and it's healthy, then why not?
Yeah, and somebody like a superstar like that probably does go regularly and get scoped, and if there is anything to worry about, not everybody has the privilege to do that. But yeah, I think if we can do functional exercises and raise awareness, it's probably going to help the artist as much as we can. And we're not there to make them worry about their voice as well. I think, in my experience, the majority of people who've ended up with things like muscle tension dysphonia and stuff like that, it's the worrying about what's wrong that's taking a bigger toll on technique than actually the pathology. Not most, but yeah, many, where there's a psychological factor to having a healthy voice as well, and constantly worrying that you're gonna, lose your voice or everything. There's people who are out there singing and communicating, like you were talking about your gospel singers earlier. But, other ones, there are other things that are much more unhealthy than a little growl here and there. So what we can do is advise our singers what, I like the 80-20 rule of, if we can stay 80% within healthy and then 20% allow for some other things. But it's all natural, isn't it? Right? If you see a spider and you scream, and it was an instinctive thing that happened. So like if you end up with a growl because of the emotion that you put behind it, that it's unlikely to instantly give you vocal issues because it's part of our human condition. But if we do it all the time and it isn't done in the most efficient, natural way, then it's bound to give us some troubles.
I hit stratospheric notes when there's a spider as well. So maybe that's what I need, to be exposed to more spiders when I'm practicing my legit.
I like it, yeah. It's all the coping mechanism. So like instead of having a little jar of feelings or TerraBands or whatever other tools you use in the studio, you could have a little jar of spiders.
Yeah, and then you're up there. I love it. I'm just pressing the pause button on the podcast for a very brief moment to invite you to book your free BAST call. If you've been thinking about joining the BAST community through one of our courses, but you just don't know which option is the best for you, then why not book your free Zoom chat with our very own Kimberly George, who has all the answers. Head over to basttraining.com/book-a-call/ and click that big blue button. That's basttraining.com/book-a-call/. Now, where were we? So imagine that you are about to close your studio for the day. You have one final singer, and in walks either Christina Aguilera or Shakira. It's been a very good day for you, Kaya.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'd love
to
get
payment for all these stars coming to my studio today.
I was going to say, I want to know what you're charging. If we were to imitate either of those singers, Christina Aguilera or Shakira, it's likely that we're going to find our tongues are playing quite a big role to create that sound. So technically speaking, engaging the tongue root or backing up the tongue in a particular way, what can that technically offer us?
Well, it'll change the size and shape of your vocal tract. So again, we're talking from an acoustic point of view. It can also increase or decrease the amount of tension or effort that you have to give on an actual vocal fold level.
Yeah.
But yeah, more than anything, the tongue is just such a massive blob in your mouth, in your vocal tract. So anything you do with the tongue will have massive effect on the timbre and tone, and also, of course, the articulation.
Yeah. And also I remember Carioba talking about how we can sometimes utilize a backed tongue as a way to help thicken up the vocal folds.
Right, because the bottom of the tongue is top of the larynx, right? The hyoid bone is, in some languages, also called the tongue bone. So it literally is at the top, whether it's part of the laryngeal structure, just keeping the laryngeal structure up. Anything you do with the tongue will, well, unless you're super, super, super good at isolating the front tip of your tongue to the back tip of your tongue, it will have an effect on the larynx directly. So, it's a big part of what we do, right?
Yeah, for sure. And with Christina Aguilera, I mean, no one's going to argue that she's got, an issue, because she sounds bloody awesome. I mean, she's got some pipes, that's for sure. But what might that backed up tongue or tongue root engagement hinder for her, potentially?
Well, she has gotten herself into trouble a few times with it, especially like coupling that up with like the scoops where she goes really kind of TA heavy or like chest heavy you know, like that kind of. And there's been elements where she then might go a little bit flat on the intonation because it's harder to thin out as you go in your higher range and stuff like that. Yeah, I might ask her to do a raspberry, then see like if she can find a slightly lighter. But then, I mean, the thing with Christina Aguilera, if you listen like through she was definitely very much that when she was young. If you've seen her when she was 9 in that it's a Mickey Mouse Club or something. And then if you listen through Burlesque and Candyman versus, you know, Beautiful, she just varies her voice a lot using, you know, loads of different voice qualities, loads of this different compression. Hurt, she's all aspirate, and like, so she doesn't just have access to this very compressed tongue back. So I do think that shows a singer who's definitely looking to learn about her voice and explore her voice.
Yeah, and I think I remember watching part of her BBC masterclass as well.
Oh, yeah.
And her warm-up, she has some classical approaches on there, I believe. So that wouldn't necessarily be an achievable thing if her tongue was not responsive.
Right.
But yeah, we know that she has a distinctive sound. We know when we put the radio on it's Christina, and we certainly know when it's Shakira.
Right. No.
So Kaya, just to round up, what myth would you like to bust about technique versus style?
One of them is that all good technique has to come from classical bass, because it can, but it's also different coordination. So I think exploring the sounds that you want with somebody who can help explore different coordinations without the fear of entering your chest voice, for instance. Or I'm not saying that all classical teachers say that, but I've had people come and they're like, oh, I can't really sing like that because when I get to the E, I need to change into my head voice or things like that. So listening to the singer, exploring in a non-judgmental, open way. That's not myth busting, that's just a bust. Yeah, where the myth was that, yeah. And then another myth is that you have to do so much to find your authentic voice, because you are you with the shape and face and the, you know, the vocal track that you have. So by expressing yourself and really connecting to the material, finding correct material, whether it's own written or whether it's covers and you know, repertoire in the musical world, you will be authentic if you're trying to convey something, not necessarily by trying to sound different.
Well, thank you so much, Kaya, as ever. Love chatting to you. And I hope you have a brilliant rest of the year.
Thank you, and same to you. Thanks a lot for having me.
Oh.